Okay, so Ecclesiastes chapters 3 and 4, and we will begin, of course, with a discussion. So actually today, I'm not going to read everybody's, but there's a few of you that I want to kind of go a little deeper on what you guys are saying, and I actually want us to think about a few of those things. So I want to start with something that Christodoulou noticed, which I hadn't noticed, and I think is really important, and I want us to really stop on that and ponder that. We are switching from under the sun, which we saw in chapters 1 and 2, right? To under heavens, right? In chapter 3. So this is important. Let's see. Christodoulou, let's look at this. Under the sun, we have in chapter 1. Do we have it in chapter 2? Let's do a little detective work, everybody. Let's try and see if chapter 2 has... Okay, chapter 2 has under heaven. Interesting. So now I'm curious, like I want to know why the author is switching back and forth. So chapter 1 has under the sun, chapter 1 verse, let's make an inventory, everybody. Chapter 1 verse 3, we have under the sun. Let's continue and see if we have any more of those. I see chapter 1 verse 8 has also under the sun. And then speak up if you see any more, right? Then I get to chapter 2. I have 2 verse
6.
Verse 6. Where? Which?
6. It's the first verse of 6. It says evil under the sun.
You're talking about chapter 6?
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, I'm still in chapter 2.
It's in chapter 3.
Okay.
Let me see 1 second. It's in the first verse. To everything there is a season and a time to purpose under the heaven.
Okay,
That's
good.
the only one in chapter 3.
And then
there
what
isn't
about
one in chapter 4.
And 2. What about 2? I'm still in 2. I have 2 verse 3. I have under heaven. Anything
There's
else?
only one in chapter 2.
Okay. So we have 2 under the suns in 1, under heaven in 2, under heaven in 3. Okay, now we're moving towards, what about 4?
There's no in 4.
Back to this is strange. Okay, what is he trying to do? And
in 2:22 there is under the sun.
2:22. Interesting. Okay, let's take a look. 2:22. Yeah. Gosh. Okay, it's all mixed up. Like
in chapter 4.
Yeah.
In my version, in chapter 4, the first line also has under the sun.
Yeah, 4:1. I have that too.
Okay.
Okay, good. So
Yeah, I thought we were doing under the heaven.
Where do you have under heaven?
Because it says in chapter 3 under the heaven.
Yeah, so we got chapter 3 verse 1, chapter 4 verse 1, and then let's look at 5 because we're doing 5 today also. Anything in 5?
There's one on heaven for 5.
I see the sun also, 5:17. Where is your heaven?
Well, it says God is in heaven.
That's different. So I got the sun there. And then, of course, William said 6. What verse in 6?
There were 2 and 5.
Oh, yeah?
On verses 13 and verses 18.
Okay, great. 13. I don't see anything. 5:13. I don't see anything.
Maybe it's just the difference in what's called
Mine,
translation.
I have it in 13 as well in my translation.
What does it say?
It says evil under the sun. In my version, the quote is, "I have seen a grievous evil under the sun."
Oh, here it is. It says it's my verse 12. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, so this is like, okay, so anybody have any idea why he's switching from the sun to the heavens and what is going on in our chapter 2? Okay, it's the heavens. Here we have for chapter 3 under the heavens. So anybody want to venture an interpretation why the author, what is the hidden meaning here? What is the author trying to tell us through this back and forth between under the sun, under the heavens? I'm curious. Olivera, go ahead.
It's just a guess, but it would be fair to say that he's going through the spiritual and the material, like around.
Yeah, it looks like, right? Because remember, we have two trains of thought, right? We have the Egyptian, which is the spatial under the sun. And then we have the Hebrew, which is maybe the temporal under the heavens, right? So, and of course, the Hebrew wouldn't say under the sun because the sun is not relevant. It's the heavens that are relevant because we have, right, the Father in heaven, right? So God is in the heavens. Whereas for the Egyptians, the sun is God, right? So these are two different religious worldviews, right? So when he's saying under the heavens, he's talking like a Hebrew. When he's saying under the sun, he's talking like an Egyptian. So I can go that far. And I was curious, it would be good to go deeper and see the context when they're used to see, but this will take too much time for right now, but it would be an interesting exercise to see when he's talking about under the sun, what is he saying? And when he's talking about under the heaven, what is he saying, right? I'm looking, if I were to just say something, without thinking too deeply, I would look at under the sun as a spatial and under the heaven as temporal, because in the Egyptian worldview, space is the realm of the gods with the sun and so forth. But in the Hebrew view is the time that is the realm of God, right? So it would be interesting to explore that. Rudolph, tell us more.
I see it similarly, and maybe we're all saying the same thing. If you go to 2 verse 11, yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, what I told it achieve, everything was meaningless, chased after the wind, nothing had gained under the sun. That happens on earth.
Okay.
Under the sun.
Yes.
If you now move on to 3, a second, is it on 3?
3:1 we have under heaven. Is that what you
So 3:1 is a how should I call it? It's a larger view. It says, born, time to die, kill, time to heal, weep, not to laugh. Those are not things that are actually occurring. They are more ideological ideas. They are more intellectual thought processes.
Yeah, it's a temporal, it's a reflection on time, which is a completely different dimension, and which for the Hebrews is a spiritual dimension, which we need to explore why. Actually would be interesting. But yeah, I'm seeing that too. Also, when he talks about all the oppression, it's under the sun, right? Again. So maybe, but then he goes into the pleasure, verse 17 of 5, and that's also under the sun. So that's seems still like the spatial versus the. So I'm gonna just, Williams, see if anyone else wants to add to this dilemma.
I was gonna say, you read what I wrote. I said it's a meta narrative where the author's talking directly to himself. He's not talking to us. We're just in the audience. And like I said that because of the fact that like he keeps mentioning all these things that he has discomfort with, and it sounds like Slaughterhouse-Five or any books where the author talks directly to themselves instead of to the audience. And I felt like the reason why it's so dark is because of the fact that it takes place in a world that's so dark, and it's almost like The Witcher. I actually brought up The Witcher in one of my statements, and I said like The Witcher has this concept of like God is capricious, he's cruel, he doesn't care, and he just shows up, does whatever, and like that's pretty much the universe he lives in. And I feel like that's what he's trying to reason with, instead of the other chapters where he's with a God that holds your hand through life and you walk with him.
Yeah, so we know, someone mentioned he's bipolar. Yeah, he definitely is oscillating between despair and hope, right? And he is talking to himself in the whole text. So there will be very dark moments when he goes under the sun, maybe, and sticks to the material realm, to the realm of the visible, right? And there everything is dark, and in fact everything is godless under the sun. This is there's an interesting quote in chapters, when he's talking about oppression and the wicked and the oppression of the poor. He says a very interesting sentence. He says, there is no comforter. Now we know the word comforter actually is a technical term in the Hebrew Bible, which actually is another name for God. So when he's saying there is no comforter, he's saying there is no God, right? So it's not even that God is doing this, like in Job, right? In these chapters under the sun, God is absent. So this is kind of, the sun in a way is eclipsing God, right? So we have this very godless perspective, very dark. And then you have the breaking into space of time, which is the realm of God, which is under the heaven, right? So remember, he's gonna oscillate between very dark Egyptian, secular, godless view to a very Hebraic, hopeful, right? But again, these are just glimpses because he falls back, inevitably back into the Egyptian darkness, right? So, but yeah, so I have one more question though that I want to kind of like hear you guys on this because I haven't completely figured it out. So we get that the sun, this is space, this is our realm, right? Where we are in control, more or less, right? But why is time picked as the realm of God? Why do you think time is the realm that is the sacred realm of God, whereas space seems to be the realm of human, right? So let's think about that a little bit. I'm curious, just philosophically, right? Let's go a little deeper. Good, I have a couple hands already. So let's, oh wow, 3 hands, I'm so happy. Okay, I'm gonna learn today. So Christodoulou, Rudolph, and Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, time is like one of the first things we learn that we have no control over, right? Like from day one, we realize time marches no matter what we do or don't do. At least in space, we have maybe the illusion of control. We can flow through it. We can manipulate it in the ways that we can.
Okay, beautiful. Yes, we have no control over time, like space. We have a little bit of control. I can go and kick this bucket over here and and it's going to spill and that will be my doing, right? So yes, whereas time, it's like heaven, right? It's like, we keep on running after time. Everybody's running out of time, all of us, all day long, right? So, and we'll see, by the way, very nice that you put it like that, Christodoulou, because we're going to see today when we study chapter 3, that time is the realm where we are out of control, but it's also the realm where God gives, right? There's, we're going to look in the Hebrew and see that time is actually given. So time becomes the realm of grace. And I want to talk about that too later today. I want to try to understand, because when we are in time, we are anxious. Like, I'm running out of time. I don't have time, right? It's constantly escaping us. We're not used to seeing time as the realm of gift, right? So I want us to think about that later, but let's go to the other two. So Rudolph and Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have to reframe it because you said it. Time is not only the time of receiving, where God gives. God even gave time. If you think about it, the creation of humanity is when time starts. There was nothing before. Whereas now that we have time, we're in some sort of a three-dimensional space that we have influence over, as Christodoulou said before. We can somehow manage it and have that conversation with God as to how we imagine it should go. And he can tell us that's wrong and here is how it's going to go. Whereas time is not to be discussed by us. We are completely out of control with time.
Yeah, very good. So going back to Christodoulou, right? Giannakopoulos, what do you think?
You guys said exactly what I want to say, but I can add a couple of things. God is timeless, right? So like you said, before we were created, there was nothing. So that means God was before time. You know, time started with us, so that means he's before time, he's after time, and he is all of time. And one of the commandments that he gave to Moses was honor thy father and mother, and that you will live long and prosper, right? So this is like a promise that he gives us, that we will live long, right? Giving us more time. And I was actually talking to my bishop the other day, and he goes, you know, one of the good things about old age is that with age, a lot of times comes wisdom. And because wisdom is experience, right? And knowledge is just you searching for things. So with age comes wisdom. And so that's like a really strong promise. honor your father and your mother, and I will give you in time wisdom, basically.
Nice. Okay, so time being the realm of wisdom, right? Again, connecting it to spiritual realm, right? So space, you don't become wise, you become smart, right? You learn how to build, you learn how to, hustle, you learn how to make money. That's smart. But wisdom, that's found in time, right? I like that. That's very nice. So it emphasizes how this realm that we are in a way, we have a dual citizenship, right? Like Plato also thought this, right? That we are both in material and in the spiritual realm. We are dual citizens of these two realms, right? So in a way, Ecclesiastes is making the same point. We are both material, we're both in control, material, but also we are out of control, spiritual beings, right? There's room for working and doing and striving, but there's also places or spaces where we will not be in control ultimately, right? So this might answer some of you guys' issues. Like a lot of you are asking this actually, that, well, if everything is out of our control, so what's the point of making any effort, right? So here I think we're seeing it. We do the work, but the fruition, which depends on time, right, is not in our control. Let's take agricultural metaphor. It's really good, right? You're sowing, right? You have to sow to get anything. So you sow, you water, but when the thing is going to sprout is not in our control. So I think that's how we can see life, right? So maybe to answer some people like Perso, I think, was asking this again. And also Edmund was asking this. Edmonds was asking this, right? What's the role here of free will? What's the role of agency? What's the role of our effort, right? So we sow, we have to make some effort, right? But it will mature in a time which is not ours to decide, right? So you can, for example, so I'll give you several examples, right? You can apply for a job, but you cannot decide when, who, where. This is time related, right? Or you can try to fix your marriage or your relationship, right? But you do not know the time when it's going to heal, right? So there's room for works under the sun. We labor under the sun, but ultimately it's under the heaven that the result comes to fruition. Are you seeing a little better now, some of you who are struggling with what's the point of our efforts, right? A person disappeared. But Edmonds, I think you asked the same question. Are you seeing a little bit, right? That you need the two of them. If you never sow anything, then yeah, for sure, nothing will happen. We have to sow, but we're not in control of how the thing will grow and when it will come to fruition. That's the realm of time, right? We control space. We can go in the field. We can put the seeds everywhere. We can water. We can walk around. We can make prayers, right? But when it comes out, that's not for us to decide, right? So I think that might be the way that Ecclesiastes is thinking. Bernard, go ahead, and then Williams.
Yeah, like the way I kind of thought about it, and we discussed it kind of in our group, and we were talking about, hustle culture as New Yorkers. Like pre-COVID, people, like for me personally, like I finally felt like I had some consistency in my life. I had a good job, and I'm like, yeah, I'm in my 20s and things are flowing and I'm going to reap the benefits and whatever, blah, 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 as we all seem to. And then, COVID like slapped me in the face and I had to like kind of reevaluate what I was doing, because it was like, now that I literally cannot go out and work my butt off to get what I want, does that mean like I'm nothing? Like, what am I supposed to do with myself? Because as a New Yorker, I'm always, we're on the move. So it was like, you had to sit there and like, remember, you're not just your job. Like for me anyway, like I'm not just what I can do at work. Like I am still a person. I have other things that bring me joy, and I had to like remember that stuff. So like
time kind of like entered, like forced
literally
your life, right? You're like, I have all this time. What am I gonna do?
Exactly. Yeah. We had to sit there with ourselves, like.
And that's when that's when you can mature spiritually, when you have all this time, right? So COVID was a breach into space of time. In a way, was a breach into the physical of the metaphysical realm, right? That's why a lot of us became very
had to figure out that balance really quick.
Yes, very good. Williams, go ahead.
like I was going to say, I'm sorry, Jackie, I didn't mean to cut you off when we were talking before. I kind of tried to poo-poo her a little bit, and I apologize, Jackie. No, when we were talking about it, I started to think I have a coworker who is positively toxic. Like, he's the most positive person I've ever met, and like he doesn't want to talk about anything negative. And like I said to him, how do you see the world if you only talk about positivity? And I think all of the things that I've read in Ecclesiastes are about balancing your view. And there's like a thing called optimal realism, and it's about basically being able to see the world in its most optimal view. And they talk about the fact that like you should be able to understand that like just because you want to get married doesn't mean you will, but you have to be able to accept that eventuality. And I feel like that's where he's taking us in terms of a psychological thought. And like I've met so many people who are toxically positive that like they annoy the crap out of me. I'm like, how are you that happy? Like nothing is that happy. Like you're happy all the time. Like literally you got a smile on your face all the fucking time. I'm like, how did you get that? And like I just look at him like, what's wrong with you? Like,
yeah, that's why Ecclesiastes in a way is refreshing, right? Because he sees the darkness, but he's able to see through the darkness into the light. I'm thinking some of the greatest authors and painters, they are capable of this dual vision. I'm thinking of Dostoevsky, which you all should read quickly, which is really through the darkness, he sees the light. Rembrandt also, the painter, it's always terrible darkness and then this luminous corner or whatever. So this is, I think, the true vision, right? The ability to see the light in the darkness, not just covering everything, right? And Ecclesiastes is doing that too, in a way, right? So very nice. Okay.
You said Dostoevsky? Sorry, Professor.
Yes, these are things you should be looking into. So I'm going to write it down for you in the chat. Thank you. Dostoevsky, I would start or end if you don't want to stop because it's the best work. Dostoevsky. The Brothers Karamazov is the best, or War and Peace, right? Karamazov is the masterpiece of Dostoevsky. And then Rembrandt, right? Anything by him, you will have this light versus darkness, right? Like Ecclesiastes, which is, I think, the true vision of life, right? It's not the Pollyanna syndrome or the nihilistic, right? It doesn't fall in those two extremes. It's seeing both at the same time. It's the capacity to see through the darkness into the deeper depth of light, which inhabits the darkness, right? Okay, great. Cool. So let's go now into the text. I'm going to go pretty slow because I myself would like to understand a few things philosophically, and I'm going to rely on you. So I'm going to start at chapter 3. And yeah, maybe we'll do all the way to War and Peace, right? As one of you mentioned in the chat, and then we'll continue after the break. Or maybe we won't take a break, I don't know, and finish early. So we'll see. So he begins chapter 3, verse 1, right? And the translation is very poor. You don't get the notion of the gift, right? Actually, in the Hebrew, it says here, for everything a time, and the implication is that it's given, right? To give for everything a time, and so that's in the Hebrew, and for everything an experience, right? So we have this notion of time, which is given. It's even more clear here when you go to the verse. Where is it? He has, where does it says he has made everything beautiful in its time? Verse 11. Yes. Okay. Yes. So we'll start with just this beginning, right? So for everything there's a time, and then he goes on, the time for birth, a time for death, a time for planting, uprooting, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's start a little bit and see what is he trying to teach us with this kind of little circle. These circles he's drawing, right? Birth, death, planting, tearing apart, slaying, healing, tearing down, right? Can anyone tell me a little bit what you think he's trying to get to here? What's his point? Edmonds, go ahead.
Well, it's similar to, I think, what we've been saying for a lot of this class, which is just that, you don't have control over time, but that's okay because God has a plan for you, right? everything is going to happen in due course, and there's no need to worry about trying to speed things up or slow them down, because everything is going to happen when it's meant to happen.
Yes, I really like the way you wrote that in your reading assignment, right? So this is really, I hadn't thought of that at all. Yours, so what Edmonds is saying, which I think we should pay attention to, is that God seems to have a appointed time for everything for our lives, apparently, right? Based, if we interpret this religiously, we can also interpret it secularly, right? But if we give a religious interpretation, it's like there is a set time already planned out, right? And but then you ask an interesting question. You say, well, what about free will then? If everything is right planned out, what about agency? So would anyone want to respond to that? So I'm curious about that. If God indeed has everything, how did you put it? It was really nicely put. It was reassuring. Can you say?
I think I basically, yeah, God has an appointed time for pretty much everything in our lives. Things will take place when they're meant to happen.
There we go. Yes, I like that. Things will take place when they're meant. And you said something like, we don't need to rush, we don't need to stress, because they will happen in due time, right? So that's a beautiful religious interpretation. It works, right? But then, okay, so then I want us to think about that. What about free will and agency? If everything is already planned out in our lives, well, what about us? Right? So I'm curious a little bit what you guys have to say about that. I've thought about it too, so I'll say a few words about it too, but I'm curious. Okay, wow, there's like a crowd of people wanting to talk. Okay, let's go with Christodoulou, Rudolph, Giannakopoulos, and Williams in that order. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's like, I guess it's more like a book. Like, because God exists outside of time, he knows how things will play out.
Oh, it doesn't do, okay, I get it.
We don't know how they will play out, and we have to figure it out. We have to read the book.
Okay, so it's like, God knows the end of the story, but we're still at the beginning reading the story, so it's kind of a big surprise, is that what you say?
Yeah, I like to think about it that way.
Okay, so he's not doing it necessarily, he's just seeing it from the outside. It's a little different what you're saying than what Edmonds was saying. What Edmonds seemed to be saying, there is a set course for us, and we can relax knowing that we will be, and you're saying, no, there's no set course, it's just God knows the end of the story, whatever path we take, right? Is that what you're saying, Christodoulou?
Well, I mean, he may, by knowing the end of the story, he may see the story, but I guess it's difficult to reconcile. Like, we feel like we have agency, but I think it was either Heidegger or Nietzsche who like talked about, like, thrownness into the world. Like, we don't really choose how we're and when and where we were born, and it's like we're just kind of thrown into it.
Okay, so would you say that God wrote the story though?
Yeah.
Because that would work with Edmonds, that God wrote the story, but we're still reading the beginning, right? Or we're in the story, so we don't know, but God in a way knows. Okay, fine, yes. Let's go to the next one. Who was, I forgot, who was it? Rudolph, go ahead.
So in the context of what we've been saying, your own agency and free will are really just another one of God's plans. And if we add the conversational piece to it, then it makes sense that he gives us the ability to plan or think that we are in charge of something, so he can communicate with us. There is a dialogue between us. I don't think it's really out of the realm of what we have been discussing the last couple of weeks.
So you're saying that God would reveal to us when is the appointed time, right?
It's whether it's revealing or not, I see Will's point, and I agree with it to a degree. But if you look at the almighty plan that's out there, free will and agency are just what he gave us in order to have something to bounce ideas off. Not quite sure if he really has that plan all thought out.
Okay, good. All right.
He is more like us, or we're more like him than anyone thinks.
So then how do you interpret that for everything there is a time that has been given? How would you interpret that?
And the time when we develop our thoughts and express our free will, that is the time that it was intended for us to express it.
Okay, got it. Very good. Okay, let's see. Who was next in line?
I was, Professor.
Oh, sorry.
The way I always thought of it as, it's like we're playing chess, you know? We still make our own moves. It's just that God knows what moves we're going to make.
Okay.
And he's also on the other side of the chessboard playing with us. And so let's say he moves a knight. That's just a piece of conflict or a tribulation that he puts in our life. And we have to play around it. You know, how we deal with that knight or a queen or whatever it may be, it's still our choice. He just knows what we're going to do.
I find that interesting because if God is playing chess with us, he can to a certain degree control the game, right? And so, but we have a limited choice. I can do this or that. I can, but there is still like he can steer things in a way through the way he plays the game. And then we can respond, but then he responds and can steer again. If he's a good chess player, right? He can totally control the game.
He's probably the best one out there. So yeah, to a certain extent, he does like control what happens in our lives, but he doesn't control our actions. That's the big distinction to make.
I get it. Yes, he
Yeah.
controls what happens and therefore can influence our actions, right? And in that sense, I find that interesting. I kind of like that. Edmonds, go ahead.
I feel like I like it's a clever bit of putting that together, right? That God can just have a moment for us to exercise our free will. But I feel like that's sort of getting around the point without getting to it, because if he picks the moment for us to have our free will, then naturally he's also going to have. You can't say he controls everything about what we do except what we do, right? I mean, are you saying that he leaves the choices up to us? He picks when we have the choices, but leaves the choices up to us? Because that just doesn't seem too satisfying or in line with what the text is saying, as far as I can tell.
You're talking to.
No, I mean, like, if I can give you an example, right? You have to save two people, or this is like pretty extreme, but you have to save two people from a cliff. You can only save one. God obviously put that tribulation, that option in front of you, but you're still choosing that option.
But he knows what you're going to choose, and he, that's part of the plan already with who you're going to choose.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, though, it's like, it's not that he's forcing us to make that option. It's just he knows what we're going to do.
Yes, right? Knowing what the person's going to do doesn't mean you influence what they're going to do. You see what I'm saying? It's what Christodoulou said. We're reading the book. We're not writing it, right? So God, does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I feel like it takes still a lot of agency away from the person, right? Because I could then lie back in my chair right now and, turn off the class and just go to bed, and, that would be that. And I could be like, oh, well, it was in God's plan. So I guess that's just that.
Yeah,
I'm tired.
You're right. There's a problem, which is why I like to think of God being surprised by our choices, which is more Mother's House, right? We saw with Adam and Eve. He's like, okay, they did this. Let me switch plans. But he can control. He can still control the game to a certain degree, because it's okay, they chose that. Well, let me do that now. In order to, right? If he wants to steer, he can still steer, but he can still be surprised. That's why I like the chess game idea very well, because you can't plan what your opponent is going to do, but you can also respond to it so that they do that, and then maybe they will do this. But I like the idea of God being surprised and be like, okay, I'll give you a great example of this. This is such a beautiful story. This is when Abraham, remember, was told by God he was going to have a son, and he was not able to have a son. So his wife brings up Hagar, which is not in the plan, right? We know that, because that's not what God wanted, right? Brings up Hagar. He has a son with Hagar, and it's so interesting. And this is so interesting. Before Hagar comes on the scene, God says, I will make you into a great nation. One great nation. Hagar arrives, has a son. A little later, God arrives on the scene again and says, I will make you the father of many great nations. So God changes his plan, incorporates Hagar beautifully, by the way, because she is actually, when you read the text, this is so fascinating to me, she's treated on the same level as Abraham. She talks to God, and she's also given 12 tribes, like Abraham will have also 12 tribes coming out of it. So there is a parallel. So God actually shifts his plan, incorporates what has happened, but is still doing his thing, right? So that's what I love about it, is that God actually is like, oh, this happened. All right, let's see what
Yeah, in keeping with the sort of the chess metaphor, I think it would be possible to say that he sees all the possible combinations of moves that could take place, but he
Yeah.
doesn't know which one you're going to take until it happens.
You can say
So
that.
he knows all the possible futures, but he doesn't know exactly which string you're going to pick of
But
the
that
millions and
makes
millions.
sense to me, the way you're saying it.
Yeah.
Okay, before we end up just the two of us, let's let's bring in a couple more people. Let's just have O and Bernard, and then I want to continue a little bit, and then we can come back. So go ahead, O and Bernard, and then let me continue.
The idea of the chessboard, though, it would be like it would be solely based off of the individual, but then like I guess one can argue that that would be based off of works and like trying to live like a life that is best, so to speak, and then that would like completely negate this idea of grace and like everything that's also under God's control. That makes any sense?
Well, no, because God is playing too, right? So he's steering the game, right?
He's playing the game, but you were saying that he can't force you to make like a move that you wouldn't want to make.
Yeah.
So there's this individual that like God is trying his best to change this guy's life, like, but then he just keeps making all the worst moves.
Yeah,
Like,
but then God is such a good player, he can still find a way to, right, to steer the game where he wants it to go. You know what I'm saying?
No, yeah, I guess it gets so hard to reconcile between like this idea of sovereignty and free will. I guess it's like very, yeah, I honestly don't have an answer, but just my thoughts.
Good. I mean, I love the Abraham story, right, where Abraham did his thing, did what we would call a mistake, and God makes it into a success story, right? Now God has several nations instead of just one. And this is interesting for Islam, right? Because basically this text is saying that Islam, or the descendants of Ishmael, right, are going to be one of the great nations that God had in mind, right? So I think I love the way that God creatively engages with our decisions, and is able to still bring us where he wants us to go eventually, but he modifies. He has to modify the plan, right? And it's interesting. I like that God can change the plan. Okay, last person, and then I continue. Bernard, go ahead.
I was just kind of thinking of it as like, just because God has a plan that may not look the way that we expect it to. So like for us, being okay or things working out in the end is usually in some form of material possession. We finally got the house and the car and the kids or something. Like that's how we look at it, where in God's mind, he might just be like, now you're at peace in whatever way that presents itself, not necessarily what, but that's how the human mind works. Like we have to try to make it something that we can actually grab a concept of. And I think that's like where the disconnect is. There's different ways that you can be okay. There's different ways that things do work out for you in time. It just may not be fathomable at this point. And at different points in our lives, we start to see the different possibilities that we can be okay. Different things are revealed to us. Like now I can be a more at peace person. Now I care about more meditating or something than I did about trying to get this one car for like the last, like that's how I kind of took it. And it reminded me of the movie Bruce Almighty in a way, which is old and I might be dating myself, but it basically was like, if no one saw it, this guy who's like annoyed with life and starts blaming God and literally is like screaming into the heavens. And then God is like, here, dude, like do my job and let's see what happens. And he kind of knew where it would lead him, and they meet back up towards the end of the movie, and God's like, hey, what's up? Like, I knew this is what was going to happen, but it didn't affect like the choices that the person made to get there, So if no one's seen, Jim Carrey. That's like that's like the first thing that came to me, or the show The Good Place, which is a whole other thing. Like,
very good. Yes, I love the way you're perfect. A bridge to the next section. What I'm going to do now, we have thought of this religiously a little bit. There is a secular, obviously, interpretation. Since remember, he's writing to Egyptians also, and I find this interpretation here in verse 10. Right. So read with me on verse 10. I really do need to get a better lighting in this, or a bigger Bible. Hold on, turn on my lamp so I can read this. Okay, verse 10 where he says, I have made everything beautiful in its time. Is that 11? Yeah, verse 11. Okay, yes. I have made everything beautiful in its time, right? You might have slightly other translations, but this is the idea, right? The word is beautiful, actually, in the Hebrew, meaning I have made everything beautiful in its time, meaning every time, in a way, has its own specific beauty. So when we go back to the list, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to build, a time to tear down, a time to get hurt, a time to heal, what the text is saying, and this is again very similar to the Stoic, right? The Stoic way of thinking, is that every time in a way is a gift, and every time that we have is beautiful and coming in a way from God to a certain degree. So this is the time. So for example, when we're born is beautiful, but also when we die can be beautiful, right? There is a way to die, right? That can be beautiful. When we build up can be beautiful, but sometimes tearing down has its own beauty. Sometimes there are some things that need to be destroyed. Relationships sometimes need to be torn down, or old habits need to, or, old ways of thinking need to be torn down, and so forth. And there is a beauty in that, right? Or a beauty in healing or destroying, right? So what the text is saying basically is that every time has its own beauty. Every season has its own beauty. It's not just summer and spring that are beautiful. The fall also can be beautiful, and the winter can be beautiful, right? So I love the way you put it, Bernard, that, you can be good no matter what is happening. There's a way to dwell in that season and be good, right? Yeah, you're not getting that car, or maybe you're not hanging out with these people or traveling, and you're maybe at home, but there's beauty, right, in being stuck at home too, right? As some of us discovered for COVID, you had to, right? There's beauty in losing the job. There's beauty in breaking off that relationship, just like there's beauty in starting a new relationship and getting a new job, and so forth, right? So this is the wisdom here, typical of the ancients. A lot of the ancients are writing like this, and Solomon is vibing, I think, with his time when he's saying, the key to happiness, right, is to embrace both the good, quote unquote, and the bad, quote unquote, as beautiful, right? And remember, for Solomon, there's no good and bad. We're going to see even more of that. There's not, this is good, this is bad. He's saying all times are beautiful. There's not a good time or a bad time. Anything that happens to you, take note. There's a treasure within that thing. You're stuck, right? And if you, especially those moments, by the way, I want to emphasize that, those moments when we feel stuck, meaning that time seems to have stopped, right? And we're like, I feel like I'm not moving anywhere. I feel like my life is not progressing. This is still a time, right? It's still a gift. There's still a gift in being stuck, just like there's a gift in moving forward, right? And we sometimes have to take the time to dig a little bit and find the treasure within every season, right? And again, Stoics said exactly the same thing. If you read Epictetus, I would really suggest try to read him, right? This is pure Solomon. In fact, there's so many connections with Greek thought in this text that the many scholars actually think this book was written during the Hellenistic time. I disagree with that, but but there are, because there's too many connections with Egypt, right? So, but you can really make a lot of connections between the Stoics, who believe the same thing. That for the Stoic, he said, Stoics usually believe that whatever nature sends you, it's for your own good. Wherever nature puts you, it's for your own good. And there's something you have to learn there before you can get to the next level, right? And you won't get to the next level until you've learned that thing, right? So to trust where nature puts us and really learn what needs to be learned at that moment is the only way that nature will then move us to the next phase of our lives, right? Williams, you've been waiting a while to talk. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, is this because if it's supposed to be about God is supposed to give us trials in our lives that we're supposed to get over? And like, are you saying that the trials in our lives are supposed to have meaning regardless if they're good or bad, having kids dying?
No, it's not saying that God is creating the death of the kids, right? Because that would really suck, right? Remember, just like in the book of Job, it's not that God is sending these things, it's that God is transforming these as opportunities for learning, right? So that's how I see it, at least. I'm not seeing God sending, like, killing people so we can learn a good lesson, right? No.
Oh,
Right.
Like I forgot. No, I was gonna say this too. I was gonna say like one of the things that I found so interesting is that like one of the books I told you about called Lucifer. Lucifer chooses to fall, but in the book, Destiny is an actual character. Destiny and Lucifer don't like each other because originally the plan was for Lucifer to take God's place. Lucifer fell on purpose. He chose to do it. And God was like, I knew you were going to do it. You got a 50-50 chance of doing either way, like everyone said before. So.
Right. Very good. Excellent. Yes. This sounds like an intriguing book. Cool. Okay, great. So, okay, but now there's one more thing, right? So we have this kind of, the view of the ancients as everything that comes to us in a way has some meaning, some beauty, and we need to basically embrace all of life. Again, Nietzsche said that, right? This is a great test question, Nietzsche. If you read Nietzsche, the Joyous Wisdom, or the old title, The Gay Science, same book, right? But they changed the title for obvious reasons, right? So he says something like that. He makes a difference. I just want to bring this up because this is really interesting. He makes a difference between being happy and comfortable, right? And for Nietzsche, true happiness is not comfortableness where everything is going your way, right? True happiness is the ability to enter life fully, to embrace the despair as well as the joy, to embrace the lows as well as the highs, to embrace the suffering as well as the pleasure. At that moment when you are able to embrace all of life, to love all of life, to love where life has put you. It's in Nietzsche that you see the famous Latin quote, amor fati, right? Love your fate, right? Love where you are, love where nature puts you. Why? Because when you love everything about your life, this is when you are truly entering life, penetrating life. You're not escaping anything of life. And at that moment, says Nietzsche, you are truly happy. You're not just merely comfortable, right? So it's an invitation from Nietzsche, from Ecclesiastes, also we saw in the book of Job, to really love all of life. This thing comes your way, love that. That comes your way, love that, right? There's no good or evil. It's all beautiful. I think Nietzsche said this also. I love Nietzsche. He fits so well here. Beautiful quote by Nietzsche. Beyond good and evil, he says, this is the title of the book, there is beauty. Right? This is kind of similar, right? It would be interesting to compare the two quotes, right? He has made everything beautiful in its time, and beyond good and evil, there is beauty, right? So and Nietzsche is a Stoic, of course, right? So very huge connection here between this text and Stoicism. But there is more. And I want us to go there before the break. He continues. So up until now, he's been Egyptian, right? This is all circular view, the view of the ancients, that everything is, there's beautiful beauty in everything. But then he continues and he becomes very Hebraic, and he says this, and this is a quote that some of you had trouble with. This is still verse 11. He made everything beautiful in his time, and then he has put eternity in their hearts, right? So I want to stop on that, on the word for eternity. Okay, so he has put, now he's going beyond Egypt, right? Eternity in their hearts. Okay, so let's stop on that a little bit. The word for eternity, will be interesting to know the Hebrew word is olam, which comes from the verb ne'elam, which actually means, I'm putting them all here, right? Ne'elam, which means to disappear or to be concealed. So basically, olam might be another word for like mystery. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. This is now entering into metaphysics, right? For now, we were in the physical realm. Whatever comes your way is beautiful. You don't have to be religious to appreciate life. You can be under the sun, right? But now he pierces deeper. And now he brings up this notion that at the heart, right, within our existence, in our hearts, God has put the mystery. So I want to talk about that a little bit. What do you think Solomon means when he says that God has put the mystery or the hidden in our hearts? What is going on? What do you think that means? A lot of philosophers have talked about this, unrelated to Solomon, actually. Okay, Bernard and then Williams.
I don't know if it's like the ability to continue learning and like striving for that deeper knowledge in a way, like to look beyond, you know, the regular things that we seek. That's kind of how I interpret it.
I like that, right? Instead of looking just at the appearances, Solomon seems to be saying there is a deeper logic here. There is a deeper dimension, and we sense it, right? So yes, life is kind of chaotic, good and bad, but there is a deeper way of seeing, right? So and it's almost an invitation, right, to dig deeper than just, you know, acceptance, right? Williams and then Rudolph.
Oh, I was gonna say it's an invitation to question, and it's not just questioning. It's being uncomfortable in the way that you question. So not just questioning your relationship with God, but your relationship with everyone. So it's saying that like no one is beyond reproach. So like even if you're the only person who dissents in a religious convention, there's no problem with that as long as you have your prior relationships and you're able to do it. I feel like that's what he's saying as well.
No, I like that, because in a way the first path was the path of acceptance, accept whatever comes your way. But the mystery, invitation to question, is basically saying, well, you can at one point question what comes your way and be like, what the hell, right? Why is this coming my way again, right? So, or why does this keep on coming my way? So, yeah, so this is in a way to, there's not just acceptance. Ne'elam, the mystery is, we need to be also intrigued, seeking, asking, going deeper, like Job, right? Job had this sense that, okay, this is coming my way, but right. So I like that very much. Rudolph, go ahead.
Well, in addition to everything that was said, I heard the word ignorance also, our or man's ignorance to intuitively know what to do following our heart. And we have a gut feeling, but we often don't listen to it. There is a certain inability of our heart, of our inner feeling to kind of know the answer, even though we're not willing to go with it.
Yeah, I like that. Absolutely. This is the idea that there is like a secret, a deeper wisdom, something that is hidden, which might be amazing, right? So I think it's an invitation to look beneath the appearances of life, right? And knowing that you can accept more, right? You can accept better when you know that there is a deeper reason for these things, right? I like to think about the ability, this idea of the mystery in the heart. I like to think about that as having a glimpse on the backstage of our lives, right? Here's the stage, here's what's happening, but backstage, we understand why it's happening, right? And the text is saying, we need to also inquire as to the why and see what is really happening in the reality. Why am I suffering? Why am I going through this again? What am I supposed to learn, right? And at that moment, you can receive it better, right? If you just receive, puff, puff, whatever comes your way like an animal, is different from receiving and pondering it. Why is this happening? What do I have to learn? By the way, this is the best advice I can give you if you're going through a tough time. Best advice. If you're going through a tough time, don't try to escape it. It's not going to go away. The only way you can begin to come out of that tough time is to ask yourself one question. What can I learn? Right? What can I learn in this moment? Right? The moment you start to do that, what can I learn? You are entering into the Ne'elam, into the mystery, into the reason behind what is happening to you. Are you following what I'm saying? If you just sit there without inquiring, what can I learn? Why am I here? You're just going to receive, paf, paf. The life is just going to beat you up and you won't know what happened. But the invitation here is to go in the Ne'elam. What's happening? What's behind the scenes? What is going on metaphysically that I need to know so that I can better embrace the physical? Let me write this down in the chat, right? What is going on in the metaphysical realm, right? Metaphysically, that I must understand, right? In order to better inhabit my physical situation, right? Which is difficult, probably. I like to tell people that the laws of the metaphysical are inversely proportional to the laws of the physical realm. Let me explain. If things are going really well in the physical realm, metaphysically, not so good. However, if things are going really bad in the physical realm, metaphysically, amazing. What do I mean by that? What do I mean that we have these two realms? When everything is good in the physical realm, metaphysically, you're not making any progress. But when everything is horrible in the physical realm, metaphysically is like, yes, you're, running the race, winning all the races. What am I saying? Janakopoulos, go ahead.
When things are really tough in life, like physically, you're able to mentally grow, and it gives you a lot of opportunities to become better and question and learn from those opportunities. Whereas when everything is really easy, there's not really much to learn from easy things.
That's
Like in the situation with Adam and Eve, it's easy to love somebody that's perfect, but it's hard to love somebody that's imperfect.
Very nice,
That's
right?
where we can learn.
Absolutely. So, right, when something hits us, which is hard, let us get into the Ne'elam. Let us inquire of the Ne'elam. What is going on metaphysically that I need to know so that I can better embrace the situation, right? Bernard, you've been, your hand's been up forever.
I just find it's funny. My major is psychology, and so I think and I feel like I'm not supposed to like love this type of talk as much because I'm supposed to always find a solution and try to help people like work through it. Like that's, the whole psychological thing. Like there's a reason for why you are the way you are. But at the same time, I love this because it's kind of like, and what I tell my friends when they're also going through tough times, it's like, sit in it, like be miserable. Like you have to feel it and be upset about it to really grasp what's happened to you, because otherwise you're not going to really gain anything, even if it's like, and the only way you'll sometimes learn that there is nothing you could do is to really just kind of sit in those feelings and realize there was nothing that could change, unfortunately, and this is just kind of life. So I love that kind of like balance, like to understanding all the way until you realize there's nothing more to understand.
And I would add, right, even if you can't do anything about it, I always think there's still something you can do. I guess I would be with Perso on that. I always feel there's something you can do in the sense of, even if you're going through a tough time and you cannot control the tough time, you can still control how you react to the tough time, how you grow through the tough time, what you learn through the tough time, right? This is the Stoics, right? They say you can't control the tough time, you can control what you become in the tough time, right? So there's still some agency there. And the Ne'elam is this moment of inquiring the hidden behind the tough time. What is hidden here? What is the hidden treasure of this difficult season that I am in? And that's what I need to start to open and discover and disclose for myself so that I can survive that season. Olivera, go ahead.
And I think we have seen that all since the beginning of the class in the text, because every time there was some lesson to be learned, God sent people into exile, and exile is nothing but a tougher time. And then like this period of toughness that like Adam, Eve, Cain, and the Babylonians had to face has always been a period that they need to grow and they need to develop. And then their hardship was just like a path to their growth. So I think we can see that if you are going through something hard, it's not necessarily, I mean, I'm not going to romanticize like people's misery, but like we can see there's like a history of like it being something that is a path to development.
Right, very good. Yes, excellent. Okay, good. So shall we take a little break before we get into chapter 4, where we will learn about silence. So it's 4:38. So let's make it a little longer. Let's do 4:45. Okay, like 8 minutes. Okay, so I will see you all at 4:45. I'm going to stop the recording.